Hello everyone, my name's Charles Campion from JTP. We're architects, master planners. Can you hear me? Can you wave at the back? Yep. Okay, I've got loads of slides and I'll whip through them as quickly as I can, but it's really interesting to follow on from the previous two speakers. I've got a book available which, if you want to talk to me in a bit more detail, well, talk to me at all, I'll be at the RIBA book stand from 12 till 1. So that's a good place to have a chat. Okay, just quickly, a little bit of audience participation. I'm not going to ask you what you think about these things, but just think about your most special natural place that you love and it makes you feel great and you maybe go back to again and again. It could be in this country, it could be abroad. Your most special urban place, and think about how that makes you feel. Could be in this country, could be abroad. And your most special personal possession. Could be a family photo, wedding ring, whatever it might be. How do they make you feel? I think when I'm thinking about charrettes and following on from Hussam's talk about bringing people together to actually be involved in a design process, finding out what the community know instead of what they want, as well as what they want, it's really important to realise that professional skills are coming up against real lives, real people, real emotions, and that's not always easy for professionals dealing in technical issues a lot of the time in a professional environment. I wrote the book really to try to sort of get the word out there about charrette processes, which actually have been going on for a long time. Collaborative placemaking, collaborative planning processes over a number of days to actually get communities and professionals together to come up with great plans for their places. And it's really important, the quality of place is so important for us. And again, Hussam mentioned about the importance of well-being. That's at the top of the agenda really now, health and well-being. And the National Trust did this fantastic piece of research with the University of Surrey where they, you can go online and have a look at it, but basically found that, I asked you those questions earlier, it's place that has a more of an importance in terms of emotional response than even family, friends, possessions, emotions related to those things. It's place, and we want to not only it's important in our well-being and our emotional response, but also we want to go back there again and again. But we also want to share these places. So bringing great places into our world and our communities is absolutely vital for everything that we do. And how we do that, through collaboration, again, it's not about someone sitting in a room and coming up with a great design. It surely has to be a collaborative process. The Amish, people often look back at the barn raising ceremonies that happen where a family wants to build a new home or a new barn, and the whole community comes together over a weekend to do that. And obviously there's a lot of pre-preparation that's involved, and there's also a lot that happens after, but there's this sort of ceremonial aspect to coming together, which is so important. That's me when I was growing up in the west side of London, noticing things like that going up, which actually they didn't look as good as that. These have been reclad, but we'd forgotten the art of placemaking, in my view, and the places that evolved over time generally and then were planned and they're based around neighbourhoods and walkable places and around people, and we lost that. The theories about light and air and open space completely lost the sort of the pragmatic view of how we live our lives, how we engage as communities, and also sort of through particularly the post-war period, planning became more and more remote from communities. This is a picture of the urban highways going through dense lived-in neighbourhoods without any consultation or with communities, actually imposition from on high. And of course it creates reaction eventually, and people like Jane Jacobs started to sort of show us how important communities are in shaping places. And after all, it's communities that do 99.9% of what happens in any place. It's not local authorities, it's not professionals. They have a role, and an important one, but it's communities that have to be involved in co-creating places. And this idea of how important health is, we're understanding more and more about it in relation to placemaking. I just pulled this off the internet. obesity, active lifestyles. It's all related to place, particularly how we feel safe in places as well. And I've spent so much of my career doing this, which is completely, you think of the impact on communities of buildings being put up like this, people having to live their lives, and then we knock them down because it's totally unsustainable, and replace them again with more traditional sort of approaches. This has nothing to do with architectural design. This is about how we shape the places, the DNA of place. And as a practice, we started working through the community architecture movement in the mid-80s, actually moving our office into housing estates to actually transform with the communities and understand what the community knew, what they wanted, what their aspirations were, turning what became a sink estate into a place that people really sort of wanted to live and met their aspirations, provided facilities, green space, and the variety of accommodation. But that was kind of done in a slightly ad hoc way, and we were involved in the Remaking Cities conference in 1988 in Pittsburgh, where a group of professionals went over to the States to talk about the future of post-industrial cities, but also to take part in a charrette. It was an American Institute of Architects, RUDAT, to work with the communities around Pittsburgh to talk about the future of their towns and places. And that was the first time we saw a sort of an organised approach to working with a lot of people, a community, to actually create a design and an action plan for their futures. And of course Pittsburgh has, the progress that place has made sort of subsequently is well known. And if you don't know, come and talk to me about it. But communities are demanding this sort of approach now as well. They're demanding to be engaged. The Civic Voice, the national charity for civic societies, has been promoting charrette processes, community engagement processes in design for 4 or 5 years now, in quite an organised way. So what is the charrette process? Well, it began, like lots of good things, by accident, where an architectural firm in the States were about to be fired off a job, and they decided to move their office to the place that they were working, to work with the school governors, in fact, to design the school. And after many attempts at getting it right, they found that through working directly with their clients on site, they actually were able to, through a process, get it right. And they said, well, this is obvious, isn't it? Why didn't we think of this before? But that's often thought of being the sort of the initial charrette process. The first American Institute of Architect charrette, or RUDAT as they call them, Regional Urban Design Action Teams, happened in 1967 in response to the civil rights movement. Architects were challenged. What are you doing to bring about social justice and improve people's lives in towns and cities throughout the States? You're actually in an irrelevance, your organisation, your profession. So they set up these RUDATs, and they made an impact very, very quickly, helped to establish the urban design profession. This is River Falls in South Dakota, where the first one was held. And it's the feedback loops that are so important. The design process is not a sort of straightforward process. You can't just sort of make it happen by magic. You have to be involved in feedback loops, designing, reviewing, redesigning, reviewing. And the community, through charrettes, can be involved in that process. And there's some research in the States that shows that to be involved in a minimum of 3 feedback loops is what's required to start building consensus. I'm going to flick through quite quickly because there's a lot of stuff, but this is an example of a charrette in Santa Fe, where the community were left out of the process completely of redesigning the rail yard that became available, and eventually found out about it and revolted against the administration, voted in a new mayor, and held a community planning process well over a year, which involved a charrette in the middle. But it was a very oral community because of the history of the place, and people knew the history of the land, and they talked and they told their stories, and turned what was going to be just a commercial development where the old railway yards were they brought it back into community ownership and turned it into this amazing community space with housing and farmers markets and commercial workspace, making space, and an incredible park, which last year I found out they held over 92 events there. It's all run by the community, owned by the community. So that charrette process transformed the lives of those people in that town. This is St Clement's, which is the first community land trust in London, which we're involved with as architects just down the road in Bow. And this just quickly shows a sort of process, not saying this is the only way of doing it, but you have to go through a process that's structured. So to launch is an important thing, get the word out there that you're holding this event where everyone's welcome to come to redesign, repurpose, in this case, an old mental health hospital. Getting into the site, walkabout, site visits, communities with professionals, holding workshops. We use a lot of post-it notes. Have open dialogue, open discussions. Don't expect people to be, at the beginning where they're going to be at the end, hopefully, through a journey. This is about, first of all, people telling you things, getting things off their chest, understanding more, working out what the issues are, what the aspirations are, what people's dreams are. Then getting around tables, again, not in too organised a way, but what's coming out of the process? How do we theme the tables? We've got professionals, again, working with community. Anyone could be around that table. I think there may be a few people in the room who were there. And then the professionals then turn what comes out, that was 2 days of public workshops, into a vision, which is reported back after a few days. Very fresh in people's minds. The ideas that people were talking about coming through. We could create a hub for our community. In Bow, we have a strong neighbourhood, but we've got nowhere to meet. But also, things can take a long time to build, so the community development element of it is really important. And this lady said, we need a Bow for Bow. We want to signal the regeneration of this amazing listed neighbourhood. And so we showed that at the report back a few days later. And then 2 weeks later, the community had built their own bow, and the fire brigade had put it up, and there was a special party Christmas mince pie event, and Danny Boyle, the Oscar-winning film director, launched the bow. So it started to raise people's awareness of the area. Meanwhile, we were continuing to hold design workshops with people, and then the Shuffle Film Festival came in as a result of all that community animation and work, and put a 10-day summer film festival curated by Danny Boyle in that case again, really animating the site and again raising people's awareness, building the community, so that when we're on site, people just want to come and see. There's so much interest, and 10% of this housing is community land trust housing. So now that it's built, or largely built, it's still not fully completed. People knew what was coming, they were expectant, totally supportive, and starts to win awards. We're very proud of this, because this is the only award, the Civic Voice Design Awards, that are actually voted for by the local communities. So that was for housing, and of course the people who are important are the people who are going to live there. And the CLT residents have started to move in, truly affordable housing for local people. Just very quickly, the last experience in central Winchester, and Liz is following on, so that's why I've got this in. A very important part of the centre of town, or the city, formerly known as Silver Hill, where the previous plans that were drawn up through whatever form of consultation were reacted against by the local community. I think 1,000 people marched at one point against the plans. So we were appointed and asked to draw up a supplementary planning document, a planning guidance for the site, and through community planning process, a charrette process over a few days, managed to engage, there were 700 people came to this, so there's various ways that you have to organise the event in order to make people feel they've been engaged and satisfied with the process. But again, getting round tables and designing is what it's all about, going on walkabouts and starting to think about the DNA of the place, the Winchesterness, that's crucial in bringing out the support, and the drawing element is so important. So that went through very successfully. There's 20 lessons from the book about participatory processes, co-design processes, and really to create sustainable communities, you have to engage the local communities, no doubt about that. And I think that the point is that it's not just enough really to think you can go and vote once every 4 years. We've got to get citizens much more active all the time in their communities. It's not, not forcing people, but actually making it relevant. And the greens, greening of streets, planting, all these things, improving people's environments are so relevant to people that people need to be engaged and know what's happening in their area. So, just going back to those questions, these are vital things. So if we're working as a community or as professionals, it's absolutely vital that we get quality into our place and it's only through these processes, I believe, that communities will really take stewardship and ownership and make these things happen everywhere. I'm trying to start a global dialogue. There's a website around the book, so there are blogs in there. If you've got anything you wanted to share, please go online and send me an email, and we can post one of your blogs. Thank you very much.